Bienvenido y buenas noches. Welcome and good evening to YSS Let's Talk. Happy to have everyone here this evening. This is our weekly series of YSS-related information, services, and programming that we're happy to roll out and to discuss. So we've got another good episode tonight. I want to talk a little bit about some of the services that we provide at YSS, but we always have to start first with introductions. I'm David Hicks, Director of YSS of Marshall County. We provide a multitude of services here in Marshalltown and surrounding communities, and that's everything from mental health to transitional living to aftercare, working with specialized populations. And one of those specialized populations is what we're going to visit with Lydia tonight. So I'm going to introduce Lydia Youngdahl. She is the Program Supervisor for our Bilingual Family Services program. Welcome, Lydia.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to give you a chance to do a little bit of a background on you, what brought you to YSS, a little bit about your history, and anything else you'd like to share that's kind of led you to the supervisory position here at YSS of Marshall County.
Sounds good. I'll start off in Spanish and then I can explain it all in English.
Fantastic.
So, buenas noches, soy Lydia Youngdahl y soy la consejera familiar por YSS. Yo soy de Marshalltown y me gradué de Marshalltown High School en 2008 y desde allí yo fui a Pella y me gradué de la Universidad de Central en 2012. Y regresé a Marshalltown para trabajar después de graduación. Y trabajaba por 2 años en las escuelas haciendo interpretación y traducción para ellos. Y después de eso trabajaba 1 año para un centro de consejería aquí en Marshalltown haciendo como trabajo social. Y desde entonces he estado aquí en YSS trabajando en esa posición, haciendo consejería con familias que hablan español. Me encanta este trabajo y me encanta trabajar en la comunidad de Marshalltown. So, yeah, I just said that I'm from Marshalltown. I graduated from Marshalltown High School in 2008, and then I went on to Central College in Pella and graduated from there in 2012, and then came back to Marshalltown and worked for about 2 years in the schools doing the translating and interpreting for the schools. Then I worked for about a year doing social work for mental health counseling center here in Marshalltown. And then since 2015, I've been doing this position, doing counseling, family counseling with Spanish-speaking families. I love this work. I love working in Marshalltown and love the people here.
You know, YSS is really lucky to have you. You know, when we interviewed you for a previous position, doing some translation work through DCAT, I felt that you were the strongest applicant we had seen in a long time. Not only are you native to Marshalltown, but you have the Spanish-speaking ability, and I know you studied abroad for a while too. So you bring several aspects to this position that can be a very hard position to fill. And of course, Marshalltown and several other communities around Iowa have had really just changing demographics in regard to minority populations over the many years. So just doing a little bit of research on bigustuScities.com, looking at Marshalltown, while 78% speak English, 28% of the population here is Hispanic or Spanish speaking. So 18% of our population primarily speaks Spanish. So we have several households that you may have grandparents and parents who speak Spanish, while you have some younger children in the home who maybe speak only English. So we have not only diversity in the community, but there's some language barriers even within homes. Is that something you've experienced?
Yeah, for sure. That has definitely been kind of a challenge working with families here in Marshalltown. Typically, the parents of the families that I work with feel much more comfortable speaking in Spanish, I guess I'll say. They understand a lot of English, but it's, typically when it comes to talking about, deeper topics, it's just hard for them to communicate that in English. And so, yeah, then you think how that kind of translates to working with your teenager, right? As a parent, if you are trying to have some serious conversations with your teenager and your teenager maybe isn't proficient completely in Spanish and feels more comfortable speaking English, then there's definitely some conflict that happens and a lot of conversations that go unhad because, the parents don't feel quite comfortable communicating that in English and the kids maybe don't feel quite comfortable communicating that in Spanish. And so there's a lot of kind of miscommunication that happens. So that has tended to be a kind of one of the biggest challenges, I think, and maybe goals that we work towards with our families is just the communication piece, learning how to communicate. And there's an additional barrier for these families than maybe a English-speaking family, right, that needs to learn how to communicate. So, it's been interesting.
Yeah, and when you start working with younger kids, looking at the Marshalltown School District, Marshalltown School District is number 6 in Iowa in foreign-born students and number 7 in Iowa of Hispanic students. So we just have a large Hispanic population, and when you look at high numbers of students who may not be proficient in English, you certainly have not only issues in the home, but certainly academic issues as well. And languages aside, there's always the cultural dynamics that are going on. So we have to make sure that we are, mindful of those cultural circumstances as well. So, what really brought Lydia to YSS of Marshall County is a grant we received, and this was through the juvenile court. So within District 2 of juvenile court, that's 22 counties. So that would be everywhere from Marshall County to Story, Boone, Hardin, up in Cerro Gordo, Calhoun, Pocahontas, Winnebago, Sac, really up the, across Highway 30 and up the I-35 corridor. Juvenile court was experiencing definitely some language barriers when a young person would get in trouble, go see a juvenile court officer, go through the court process. While that young person may speak English or may not fully comprehend English, maybe the parents are in that same situation. So juvenile court put out for bid this unique service where we would provide not only the translation piece, but that counseling piece as well. So we've had that. It's a 3-year grant. We are almost finished with year 1. And it just kind of takes me back to some of YSS's core values. One of our core values at YSS is collaboration, and that's really through supported external partnerships. We develop kind of an internal teamwork where we kind of maximize shared knowledge, our skills and talents to try and create the best possible outcomes we can for young people. So our collaboration with juvenile court is very strong with this program, but we also have other relationships with juvenile court across YSS with not only Rosedale Shelter and Youth Recovery House and things like that. So this fits in very well with the partnership we already have with juvenile court. So as you are working with families, Lydia, what sorts of things or what sort of barriers that are families experiencing once they get a child involved with juvenile court?
Yeah, so like I talked about, a lot of times a goal that we'll have with families is just communication. And so helping them work on healthy communication skills. We talk with a lot of families, that parents have something that they need to bring up with the kids, but the kids will immediately get triggered and start getting angry, and so then they just stop having the conversation. So we work a lot on maybe take a break, but you need to be able to come back and have this conversation later when you're calm and able to handle it. So things like that. rules and expectations, respecting those rules and expectations in the home, as well as at school. For a lot of families there, we work on kind of making the connection for the youth between the home and school. And so whether that's helping the families communicate with the school, or even just helping families maybe enforce consequences if there have been consequences given at the school, kind of helping kids make that connection between, if I get in trouble at school, then the home is going to respond the same way. And so, yeah, some of that reinforcing of those rules and expectations to keep them consistent for the kids, because that's helpful for the youth as well, to have consistent expectations. And then just helping the families follow the probation agreement. So each kid will have a agreement with their probation juvenile court officer that they agree to follow through with. So that's services that they participate in and receive to help build skills. So helping them bridge any of those barriers that they might have to following through with those services and getting the help that they need.
Again, we're talking to Lydia Youngdahl, who is the program supervisor for our juvenile court bilingual community liaison grant. So Lydia, you're the program supervisor, but we have additional staff working in this. Talk a little bit about Stephanie and what she brings to the position.
Yeah, so Stephanie, when the contract expanded about a year ago, Stephanie came on full-time as a bilingual counselor for us. And so she's also from Marshalltown, graduated from UNI, and then started here with us. And so she also knows the community well, and is a native Spanish speaker. So that, I think, gives kind of a different edge as well, being part of the community here. And so, yeah, she's been a great addition to this contract, and she's a quick learner and willing to try anything. And so, yeah, we've really thrown her in with COVID and everything, trying to learn the new position and all of those restrictions that come with that. So,
yeah, Stephanie Covarrubias has just been a great addition to our team. Yeah, we've kind of thrown her in because, juvenile court has high expectations for this grant, so we've got to certainly jump through some hoops. A little bit ago, I kind of talked about some of the statistics in Marshalltown of just the high Spanish-speaking population, and largely some of those folks are from Mexico. But through this program, we are learning that, we have some Spanish speakers from outside of Mexico coming up in rural areas across Iowa. So talk a little bit about some of the other families you've worked with outside of Marshalltown.
Yeah, so that is kind of a trend, I guess, we've been seeing in some of the other smaller communities. The Hispanic Spanish-speaking population here in Marshalltown is pretty well established, but there are some new work opportunities that are popping up in some of these other rural communities that are bringing newer immigrant populations. And so we've worked with a lot of families from Guatemala, from Honduras, El Salvador are a few of the ones that we've worked with most recently. But yeah, and some of these smaller communities, their infrastructure is just kind of lagging in being able to serve these Spanish-speaking families, for one. And then also we're seeing a lot of the youth themselves are not able to speak English yet either, because they're so recent coming to the United States. So that's kind of another barrier that we've been navigating in those areas, is just figuring out how to then find services when the youth doesn't speak English, because we've not really had to deal with that here in Marshalltown as much. So instead of just finding someone who can translate for the parents while the kid can receive services in English, now we're having to find services that will offer Spanish even for the youth. So yeah, that's been a very, I think, just eye-opening to see some of these communities and the lack of resources really that they have set up. A lot of the communities maybe don't even have Spanish speakers on their police force yet, so when these kids are getting charges, they're saying, I have no idea what charge I have because I couldn't understand what the officer was saying. So yeah, it's been challenging in a good way, I guess, kind of learning more about these other communities and making us work harder to try and figure out how to serve these people best.
Yeah, and working just with the rural population presents in itself a lot of barriers of getting to services, and then just finding services for these niche populations and making sure we fill those needs is critically important. So briefly talk a little bit about maybe a life cycle of how you would get a referral. You mentioned police may charge a young person with some sort of law violation, goes to juvenile court. What happens from there? How do they contact you?
So typically we're contacted by the juvenile court officer because we do the interpretation for those intakes. So we're kind of there from the beginning. And like I mentioned, in some of these other rural counties that we're now in, the contact is happening sooner because the juvenile court officer is not able to talk with anyone in English to set up those appointments. And so we will contact the family to get an intake set up. Then we attend the intake with the family and translate for that. And then sometimes we translate for the intake and the juvenile court officer feels that in-home services are not necessary for the case. They gather a lot of social history information, background about the client and the family. And so then they kind of make that determination of whether in-home services are needed. So sometimes we translate for the intake, and then that's aside from maybe a call every once in a while to check in and see how things are going. We don't have much contact with them. But if the juvenile court officer decides that in-home services are needed as part of the probation agreement, then we would work with the family weekly, usually. Sometimes kids need like an individual one-on-one counseling in addition to family counseling. And so we can meet with the kid one-on-one and also meet with the family, and that kind of helps to build rapport as well. Gets a little bit more buy-in from the youth sometimes. But yeah, so then we'll work within the family, communicate back to juvenile court about how things are going. If there's any concerns, we can help bring those up with the juvenile court officer. If mental health is a big concern, we can help the family get referred to a therapist and help with that whole process. So yeah, it just really affords a good opportunity to have a lot of warm handoffs to various agencies. So whatever kind of the family needs, we can help facilitate that, which has been really neat.
Yeah, and we provide a multitude of services right under this roof that we can refer. If it's a youth aging out of foster care, we can assist with that, therapy issues. So, besides you and Stephanie providing the bilingual counseling services, Cindy Velasquez is our administrator, Spanish speaker. So we have funding through the United Way that helps to support her time to deal with whatever translation issues coming in through the door. So just a couple weeks ago, of course, we purchased a former police department building here in Marshalltown. So we occasionally have people coming in thinking this is still the police department. So a couple weeks ago, we had a couple of Hispanic, Spanish-speaking gentlemen coming in thinking this is the police department. And they're a landlord of some apartment complex and wanted us to evict some people who hadn't paid rent and damaged some of their property. So Cindy had to provide some of that translation services, that this is not the police department. We don't have that force or that scope within our services. So, and we'll continue to provide those Spanish-speaking services, whether they're involved with juvenile court or if they're just people off the street who need documents translated. I know we've worked with some people who kind of fell behind with car payments and their car was looking at being repossessed. So we kind of worked through that process as well. So we want to make sure that we're working with that population the best that we can, not only respecting the language, but the culture as well. So, certainly the families that we work with, we have to hold them accountable as they go through juvenile court, but this juvenile court contract holds YSS accountable too. So some of the things that we have to do is, obviously be fluent in Spanish speaking, but also be able to write it, communicate it effectively. And we have to respond to referrals within 48 hours and develop a case plan within 5 days. So what are some of the typical maybe items that would be on a case plan for a family involved with juvenile court? What would be some of those initial goals?
Yeah, so some of the goals we usually put are to follow the conditions of the probation. So just in general, that's something that all the kids have to do. And then keep regular communication with their juvenile court officer is usually another big one. So we help facilitate that with the parents, obviously, so parents can go through us to communicate back to the juvenile court officer. But yeah, those are typically kind of some two general ones that we put on there, in addition to some more specific, if the family needs communication work, if the family needs to work on their relationship, maybe the parent-child relationship, if the family needs to get set up with mental health services, that would be something that we would, be working on and checking on and kind of following up with every appointment.
It's been great visiting with you tonight, Lydia. This is a unique service. We cover a lot of counties, 22 counties in the state of Iowa. Again, that's that partnership with juvenile court with providing not only bilingual counseling, but just being the community liaison to that Spanish-speaking population. So, it's those Marshalltown over to Boone County, then up the I-35 corridor. So there's certainly a lot of families out there in need. Once they get involved with juvenile court, they can be referred to Lydia or a Stephanie within YSS of Marshall County. We'll reach out to those families within a couple days, set up a case plan, provide that translation with juvenile court, and with the parents as well, because if juvenile court officer says, kid, you have to do 15 hours of community service, that needs to be effectively communicated to the parents as well to hold that child accountable to the court for those hours. So we appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. YSS of Marshall County, you can see it right there on your screen. We're at 22 North Center Street. Provide a multitude of services, and our bilingual family counseling services is certainly one of our stronger services we provide here at YSS of Marshall County. Lydia, thank you again tonight. Anything we didn't cover that you can think of?
We covered a lot of ground. I think we're good.
All right. Appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. I think May 31st, Ruth Buckles will be back on. Ruth just does an outstanding job here at YSS. May 31st is World Tobacco Day. So Ruth and John will be here to discuss that. So be sure and tune in next week to YSS Let's Talk. I wish everyone a great evening, and thank you for everyone tuning in. Stay well.
Thank you.